Hello everyone. In today's video I want to take a look at some of the key elements that eventually led to the events of the story. And to do this we need to discuss about Vila, Windsong and the people of Rayashki, the protagonists of version 1.8. I would like to start by thanking Aoan for helping me make this analysis. Also shout out to MKLNRB 1.8 analysis. Some of their sources were very useful to write this video. I'll be leaving both of their profiles in the description, so give them your support. One of the reasons that motivated me to make this video was to bring some light over some topics that aren't discussed in the fandom about this version. Also to question some of the problematic assumptions some players have regarding it. For example, in the late 1980s, Francois Tom, I believe is how you pronounce his name, argued that the Soviet Union was, and I quote, a world without meaning, without events, and without humanity. We can also mention the sentiments expressed in Fukuyama's End of History thesis, in which he proclaims the definitive triumph of capitalism in the global class struggle and the obsolescence of socialism. Some of these assumptions are present, for example, on the language and terminologies people use to talk about these characters and Soviet socialism. If we wish to really understand and engage with the story first, we must put aside these assumptions reproduced by the West, as well as the portrayals that assume Soviet citizens were passive actors that had no agency at all and were incapable of critical thinking. Now, as you might already know, Rayashki is based on the Soviet mining settlement of Pyramiden in the Norwegian Arctic archipelago of Svalbard. The town was almost entirely self-sufficient, equipped with a cafeteria for the workers, schools and daycares, dozens of apartments, and even a swimming pool, I believe. Settlements like Pyramiden were designed to be the ideal Soviet utopia. However, the settlement fell into decline in the late 1990s, affected by the economic and geopolitical crisis of the Soviet Union and the almost complete depletion of the coal. The decision to abandon it was finally made in 1998. This relates to the title of the video, a reference to a book by the same name that talks about how the collapse of the socialist system was completely unexpected to most of the Soviet citizens, how they had the impression that everything that represented the socialist life was permanent, immutable, until it was no more. Similar to how the people of Rayashki thought their little town, despite the lack of resources and constant hardships, would never disappear. A storm as unexpected as this collapse would wash everything away. When the storm came, Vila turned on the TV at the foundation only to find that there's no other program except Swan Lake, a ballet deeply entwined with the politics of the USSR. Finding a broadcast of Swan Lake was usually a bad sign, as it was often used to block access to the news, and it came to represent the backdrop for Soviet political upheaval, especially in the 80s and early 90s. Swan Lake, an early warning of the fall of the Soviet Union, was used in the story as an early warning for the storm as well. The people of Rayashki tried to build an utopia for everyone, based on values and ideals like community, equality, selflessness, and concern for the future. They lived socialism as a system of human values and an everyday reality. Some of these interpretations were not necessarily the same as the official ones provided by the Sino agents or the state. Speaking of these ideals, I think one of the characters that best represents them in the story is Bila, a teacher with a compromise not only with an education that's not afraid to tackle the social and political currents that condition it, but also with her students. Just like one of the foremost representatives of Soviet pedagogy was Krupskaya, who worked to build an education with a feminist and emancipatory approach, criticizing the capitalist productive organization that reduced women to childcare tasks. For her, education should fight against all forms of exploitation and subjugation. A lot of her teaching techniques also remind me of the Freinet techniques, a teacher who was quite unhappy with traditional teaching methods and routines. So he moved to Russia and inspired by authors such as Rousseau, de Crowley, Marx and Lenin, came to the conclusion that a new education is only possible by promoting every student's activity according to their necessities. Bila uses some of his techniques, such as free drawing and writing, to act as a bridge between every student's life and the school, while also allowing the kids to share their feelings. We can also mention the work of the revolutionary Paulo Freire and his contributions to education as a political act, understanding it as a seedbed for cultivating critical thought, engaging citizens and sowing hope for a more equitable and just future, envisioning pedagogy as a living project of freedom, a practice rooted in democratic humanism that aims to challenge the conditions that maintain oppression and inequality. When she speaks with the citizens, we can see this educational approach in rejection of this collapse of the distinction between a market economy and a market society. She stands her ground in defense of the notion of a shared citizenship, providing the educational condition for enabling the people of Rayashki to fight for their town in the name of a socialist democracy. If Bila provided an awakening of the critical consciousness of the town, then Winsong, through the use of geography as a strategic knowledge and practice, made it possible for the people to take control of the space they inhabit and effectively fight off against the agents that were trying to get rid of them. Sino already knew of the coal deposits, but withheld the information from them because geography is used primarily to make wars, organize territories, and control the people inside of those said territories. Think of a map, for example. The act of making a map implies a certain political and scientific control of the represented space. It is a tool of power over that space and every single person that lives in it. This is why the access to maps is so restricted nowadays, especially those of a great scale. It is a strategic practice necessary for those in power, and by sharing this knowledge she allowed the townsfolk to efficiently learn the spatial characteristics of the space they live in, thus making it possible for them to effectively revolt, take back their town, and kick Sino out. During the post-war period, there was a noticeable anxiety regarding the quality of maps and the training of cartographers, so alternative ways to make geography and cartography, represented by the leyline studies, were viewed as ideological rather than scientific. But science is far from being neutral or apolitical, so rather than keep her subject of study contained in research papers, she decided to share it with the people in order to keep it alive. We can see then how Villa and Winsong complement each other perfectly in the story. I hope this short video helps folks see why this person is so special to me. Thank you so much for watching. You can find my sources in the description, and as always, I wish you all good health. Take care.